It's that time again. It's Baggy Hi-Fi time. Greetings once again, cats and kittens. Welcome to Baggy Hi-Fi, this channel devoted to record collecting in the vinyl community in the UK. And here is the Easter special, number 14. This is a response to a thread which is going around on YouTube at the moment for 10 favourite guitarists. And I've noticed that I think Steve Whitty might have started this in the Birmingham area, and also Chris at Vinyl Orchard has had a go at this, so I thought I would have a go at talking about string pluckers, axe wielders, neck shredders and groovy strummers. I do remember back in the midst of time, the music papers used to have annual polls where readers would vote for their favourite guitarists, favourite albums, etc, etc. And the results were always very predictable. It would be Eric Clapton or whatever at the top, and maybe Steve Howe. So it's all very subjective really, and maybe a little bit predictable. But hopefully my list isn't going to be too predictable. I'm going to go straight into the list now with, this is in no particular order, just 10 of my favourite guitarists. So I'm going to begin with Neil Young. I remember a few years ago being around with some friends at their house watching, I think it was the concert of Bob Dylan's 30th anniversary concert or something, and it was one of those occasions where loads of famous musicians are on stage together jamming away. It usually doesn't really work very well, and Eric Clapton was on the same stage as Neil Young, and his presence, that is Eric Clapton's, did divide us who were watching it. And I quite like Eric Clapton when he was in Cream, but Jack Bruce was the man for me musically. But Neil Young, when he soloed, it was just so much better than Eric Clapton, especially when he's playing electric guitar, especially with Crazy Horse. So much emotion and feel, so distinctive. Yeah, Neil Young, that's the first of my favourite guitarists. Now number 2 is an acoustic guitarist, John Fahey. There's one of his albums. Although his sound, solo acoustic sound, is based on blues and folk and American music, there are some raga and Indian elements in there, and especially on these longer tracks, like on this album, just 3 tracks on this one. It's so immersive, and if you haven't heard John Fahey, then check him out. Now the third favourite guitarist in this list is Marc Bolan. Now I do love Tyrannosaurus Rex, when Marc was the elfin hippie troubadour, but once he went electric, you could tell that he was always a rock and roller. His style is, I would say, very influenced by early rock and roll, Chuck Berry and the like. You often hear about guitarists talking about playing licks. Well, I think Marc Bolan was the master of the lick, because just think of those riffs in things like tunes like Ride a White Swan, so memorable, Jeepster. In my book, he was a great guitarist. Number 4 is Frith, a veteran of the avant-garde scene, and he has made many solo records. I do have one which is, I think, is it just called Solo Guitar? Anyway, that was a long time ago. This is the band that he was first came to prominence with, Henry Cow, Marxists, musical mixture of, I always didn't really realise that there's an influence there of Frank Zappa, because I only heard Frank Zappa after I heard Henry Cow. Modern classical music influences as well. When I was a teenager, I loved this stuff, and I still like it now. And the guitar solo on this album by Henry Cow on Rest, the guitar solo in Bittern Storm over Ulm, it's said to be influenced by the Yardbirds. Would you believe it? And I never knew. I always thought this was a typo, the name of this track, Bittern Storm over Ulm, until I found out many years later that a bittern is a bird. Now, number 5 is Bill Nelson, especially in his Bebop Deluxe incarnation. One of my favourite albums by Bebop Deluxe, Futurama. Very flashy guitarist, very skilled guitarist, but what I like about the sound is it's very very much of the glam era as well. It's that Les Paul, very kind of metallic sound. Number 6, Richard Thompson. Made many excellent solo albums and brilliant records he made with Richard and Linda Thompson. Here he is here on Legion Leaf, very much an acclaimed English folk rock album. I do remember hearing this album for the first time, and particularly Richard Thompson's solo on the song Sloth. If you want to hear Richard Thompson maybe at his best, listen to Sloth on Full House by Fairport Convention. Now here's a choice, number 7, which has appeared in other people's choices for their favourite guitarist, and yeah, he has to be there in my book. Robert Fripp, not only in King Crimson, but his work that he did with Bowie, especially on the Berlin trilogy, is just unsurpassed, and especially, you know, in most people's minds on the actual song Heroes. Yeah, here he is here with collaborating with Eno on Evening Star, but man of many styles, but totally distinctive. The mellifluous playing on some of the King Crimson early albums, like this one, In the Wake of Poseidon. More angular stuff on Lark's Tongues in Aspic. Robert Fripp. Now number 8, a guitarist who probably started off just mainly as an acoustic folky, but then in a later career, by the time she got to the 70s, she was playing in a much more jazzy style, and it's Joni Mitchell, one of my favourite guitarists, well known for her unusual tunings. No one else really sounds like Joni. And if you listen to, or if you see the film The Last Waltz and see her playing on Coyote, that is an example of why I think she's such a great guitarist. And this is one of my favourite albums by Joni, Don Juan's Reckless Daughter. She really stretches out on this one. It's a double album. Yeah, Joni Mitchell. Number 9 in my favourite guitarists is Jerry Garcia, especially in the early recordings of the Grateful Dead, when they were at their psychedelic peak. This is probably, in my mind, their best studio album, but it does mix live recordings. It was quite revolutionary at the time, weaving live recording in with studio recordings. Yeah, Jerry said to have practiced his guitar playing 8 hours a day, and you can tell he's just so fluid and lyrical and inspired. And there's very, not just psychedelia in Jerry Garcia is detected, but also bluegrass and roots American music. There's another great one from that psychedelic period, Aoxomoxoa, Jerry Garcia. Now number 10, although he came to fame in the 70s, it's a guitarist which I've only really just recently started to like, and that's Tony McPhee of the Groundhogs. And this is one of their 70s albums, Split. The Groundhogs were a trio, very stripped down. When they began, they were very much a blues band, but as you got to albums like this, Tony McPhee's sound is just something altogether. Very kind of gritty, harsh sound. very tight playing, stunning. And before he went into the Groundhogs, he was a member of Herbal Mixture, a great psych band who were very short-lived but can be found on the Perfume Garden compilations. So that's and also on some of the Rubble collections as well. So that's Tony McPhee. Now, a guitarist which other people have mentioned in their 10 favourite guitarists. So this is the honorary mention. It doesn't mean that he's anyway inferior. And it's Ronno himself, Mick Ronson. The Spiders from Mars and Bowie wouldn't have been anywhere near as fantastic if it hadn't been for Mick Ronson and his gold Les Paul. I do love this first solo album by Mick, Slaughter on 10th Avenue. It includes some Bowie songs. If you like Bowie and you haven't got this one, you really do need to get this one. So that's it. 11 guitarists in all. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in as ever. Thanks for your subscriptions and your comments. And a happy Easter to all. Bye for now.